The Salty Sales Sages.
Hello and welcome to the Salty Sales Sages. I'm Greg Grimer.
And I'm Simon Stillwell.
Today we've all dressed up in our suits. Well, David's dressed up in a suit for Formal Friday as we're speaking to someone important. David Boldon is an investment banker who's worked in capital markets in New York, LA, London, Singapore and Hong Kong. He's also built fintech sales at 4 software firms, including SunGard, that's now called FIS, before starting his own executive search firm. Welcome to the podcast, David.
Thank you very much, Greg and Simon. Appreciate it. Appreciate the invite.
We're very pleased to have you joining us today, David, because you've got to me what's a unique history in that you've been successful in 3 aspects of business, which is working in a bank itself, selling to banks and managing those salespeople globally. And now you're recruiting into both banks and fintech. Now, I know some people who've done 2 of these things, but you're the only one I know who's done all 3.
That's because I'm old.
Listen, I know the feeling.
So, Simon, I think you've got the opening question here. Do you want to fire away?
Yeah. Listen, David, it's a real pleasure to meet you and have you here. Thanks very much. And thanks for smartening us all up a bit.
Yes. We made the effort. I actually shaved this morning.
In my mind, I've had hundreds of salespeople. And when a salesperson over-delivers on their goal, which, as we know, is only a small minority, the recruitment fee is justified many times over. Given your experience on both sides of the transaction over your career, what scenarios have you seen where engaging a recruiter really paid off? And secondly, for what specific roles in sales?
So Greg and I have a common friend, Ellen O'Dwyer, who runs the O'Dwyer Group. And she was my first real experience as a recruiter. In fact, it's eerie timing because I met Ellen on Valentine's Day, I think in 1998. I had just started as head of global sales for a fintech firm in Philadelphia. And she called me and said, "Can I come buy you lunch?" I said, "Are you going to be my Valentine?" And she said, "Absolutely." And we became instant friends. But she came down, of course, it was a cold call, right? And she wanted to become my recruiter because she knew I was in a new position as a global head of a sales team. And what I found compelling was that Ellen had been a producer herself. She'd been a rainmaker herself. So she knew the right questions to ask me about my needs. And she also intuitively knew what kind of people would fit into the market globally. In other words, I was hiring salespeople in the U.S. domestic market. I was hiring them for the European market and for the Asian market. And her firm and her reach and her experience allowed her to connect with me both culturally and intellectually on the right types of candidates. So, did we hire all rainmakers who were able to produce 150% of goal? No. But I don't think you need that many rainmakers to have a successful team. If you've got 5 or 6 or 10 salespeople and 25% of them are exceeding goal, you're doing pretty well.
Yeah. So in working with Ellen, and then obviously you've worked now well over 10 years running your own firm, what golden nuggets have you learned about that relationship between the hiring party and the recruiter where they add that value? What do they do? What's the magic?
I think the biggest value add that a recruiter brings is time. In other words, if I'm the sales director and I'm running a team and we're out visiting customers and clients and trying to close deals, I don't have time to call through LinkedIn or any number of, Zoom or any number of 100 databases and spend the hours it takes to find passive candidates who are hitters, right? In other words, there's always candidates looking for jobs and answering job posts. But the most talented candidates, in my mind, have their head down, producing, making numbers. And you've got to tap them on the shoulder as a recruiter and say, "I know you're busy, but it might be worth your time to take a look at this new opportunity." And it's also a numbers game, right? In other words, people like me as a recruiter, I reach out to 60 or 70 people every single day. Now, I don't talk to them, right? I talk to maybe 10, all right? But I know that if I keep hitting those volume numbers, that in the course of a week, I'm probably going to find 5 placeable candidates.
Do you think now, as a recruiter, you've got a much better sense of speaking to someone and saying, this person's got that magic touch that you didn't necessarily have when you were just a sales director running sales, because you've just met more people and you can do it by feel?
I think that's right. I think the experience of having built sales teams, and not every hire was a success, right? Some were failures, right? So that you learn from that process. And then moving to the other side of the table to become a recruiter, I spend my entire day looking through resumes, reading resumes, talking to people, hearing stories, right? I mean, I've joined a large firm now, 500 recruiters across 80 industry groups, and we meet, daily on conference calls where we share stories about success and failure, what works, what doesn't. We have a formula that works. And we share stories about hard knocks, right? About things that don't work. And so that allows us as a firm and us as individual recruiters to run our desks in a fashion that allows us to be a lot more successful than the head of HR or a sales director who does not do this every day, who does not do it for a living.
We hear a lot that companies recruit salespeople on the basis of, look, I might know a guy. Do you see that still quite a lot? And is that what you come across? I mean, people always say, by the time you look at LinkedIn, for instance, any job that's on LinkedIn is already gone by the time you spot it on LinkedIn. It's a box ticking exercise. I hear people telling me the whole time. But do you? I mean, you just described an enormous amount of work that you go through every single day in order to find the right candidates for your clients. So the sort of, I might know a guy, I go into a business, I say to Greg, hey, listen, I know this really good guy that I worked with before. Is that honestly the rarity, and still, the majority of good candidates get placed by recruiters?
I think everybody who has any years of experience has a network that's of some quality that you can tap into. But it won't be long if you're building out a sales team, either on a national or global basis, before you tap out of that network. So you might know a guy, you might know 2, but you're not going to know 25.
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
So if you're building a team of any size, you're going to have to reach out and find another way to find all these assets. And I know a guy won't get it done.
Tell me a little bit about LinkedIn, right? And how has LinkedIn improved, or perhaps not improved, the recruitment process for people, right? And I'm talking here specifically about recruitment as opposed to obviously generating business internally.
Right. I'm a huge believer in LinkedIn. I've been a user of LinkedIn since 2004. I was there at the beginning when there was no LinkedIn recruitment module, right? It was just LinkedIn. Everybody had the same tools, and then they had LinkedIn. Then they had Recruitment Lite, and now they've got a tool that costs near $40,000 a year for full blown recruitment, which is what I have access to at my current firm. It's a game changer. I mean, we are 500 recruiters. We place 300 people in new jobs every month, and 50% of our candidates come from using LinkedIn. 50% of our placements come from LinkedIn. So it's a game changer. And now that LinkedIn is adding AI, okay, it's becoming even more powerful. It becomes powerful because it helps you screen candidates down to a zip code, down to a set of qualifications, and reach out to them quickly. AI allows us to write job postings a lot more quickly that you can post on LinkedIn, allows you to send emails instantaneously. So It's a complete game changer and a very, very useful tool. I think it's the most powerful tool in recruitment today.
One thing you don't typically see on LinkedIn, you do occasionally see it, is people talking about their actual performance, a hard objective performance.
Mm-hmm.
So given how few salespeople actually perform to target and a minority over deliver on targets, do you think that compiling a lengthy dossier is a very wise idea for any salesperson? And should salespeople be showing up at interviews, job interviews, and interviews with the recruiters with commission payment evidence and other stuff to prove objectively what they're claiming they did?
So, even though I do a lot of recruitment in banking, I focus on business development people because it's what I know best, and it's who gets compensated the best, which allows my fee to be maximized.
Yeah, cool.
Right.
Very
So
smart.
exactly. So, the answer to your question is absolutely. When I come across true rainmakers, they all speak in terms of metrics. Okay, they start with metrics. You know, I'm talking to someone right now, for example. I'm doing some recruiting for a bank in the San Francisco Bay Area, and they want people who have covered the middle market, who can produce at least 30 million in new commercial and industrial loans a year, all right, and 30 million in deposits. Well, I've been able to use tools like LinkedIn and other tools that we have at our disposal to come up with candidates that are doing 50 and 60 and 70 million a year. Because in the Silicon Valley, once you get a client that starts to turbo grow, their demand needs become very, very strong. And if you've built a relationship with that client, as you have doing 30 or 40 or $50 million worth of loans a year, it's portable. So you can not only join a new firm, but you can bring that client with you. So the answer is yes. Not only should you have a dossier of your production, but you should be able to offer me as a recruiter and my client references that I can talk to, like your customers or your senior management at previous firms, as well as any track record. I mean, some people deliver me Excel spreadsheets that go back 5 years that show consistent production year in, year out. Those are the kind of people that are worth their weight in gold to place.
How do you verify that?
Well, references work, right? So
Do
if
they?
someone tells me that they were producing $30 million worth of loans per year, I ask for an Excel spreadsheet that talks about the deals. I ask for permission to contact either their former supervisors, okay, or their customers. And the other thing that happens in the marketplace is, for example, in the San Francisco Bay Area, if you're a producer, everybody sort of knows who you are.
Okay.
So when I walk in with a resume to a bank and I present it to a sales director or the executive vice president in charge of lending, for example, either he already knows the candidate or he can pick up the phone and call 4 or 5 people who the candidate has probably worked for in the past and validate it. So, if you're in fintech, if you're in financial services, there's all these networks that everyone has at their disposal and they use them. So a lot of times they'll ask me to check references, even though they both know that they're checking references using their own network as well.
Good.
Yeah, so I've got a question on culture, right? So one of the things that we all talk about is that it's really important to have, to employ people that fit the culture of the firm. Obviously, you're on the outside as a recruiter. But how do you go about understanding the culture of your client, the company, and then how do you test a candidate for cultural fit?
That's a great question, and it's probably the hardest to answer from both a recruitment point of view as well as a hiring manager point of view, or even as a candidate. there's lots of people who can sell whatever product it is you're selling, right? But people fail more often than not because they're a cultural misfit inside an organization.
Yeah.
Or they thrive because they're a cultural match within the organization. One of the ways that you begin to understand it is by asking the right set of questions. So, for example, when I'm talking to a new client that I don't know much about, I ask them questions like, how long have you been there? 10 years. Well, what has kept you here? And listen to them describe the reasons why they've been there for 10 years. And so tell me about your career progression. How did it work out? Did you have a mentor? They'll walk you. People love to talk about themselves if you give them the opportunity. So when you ask those kinds of questions, they'll begin to tell you a story that sometimes goes on for 15 minutes about their career progression. Well, now what have I done? I've learned a lot about the culture by listening to a 10-year story from a senior executive. Okay. I then will turn around and say, okay, tell me about a success story that you've hired, why that person succeeded, and now tell me about a failure. And again, you're getting all sorts of clues about why people succeed and fail inside that organization based on these kinds of questions. And the final sort of tool that I always recommend to candidates is if we get to the closing sort of part of a hiring process and it looks like they're about to hire you and you're about to join them, you have your own LinkedIn network, Mr. Candidate. Use it, okay? Go into LinkedIn, find people who work at this company and reach out to them and ask them about their experience. They'll be happy to talk to you if you tell them, look, I'm seriously considering joining your firm. Please tell me what it's like to work there. Or you can, on LinkedIn again, find people who used to work there, who moved on and give you enlightenment. So these are all tools you can use to understand the culture, measure the culture, and validate it as a hiring authority and as a candidate.
On that exact topic, how good are Indeed and Glassdoor? Do you think they give quality feedback, Indeed and Glassdoor, or do you think that's just for people mostly going and bitching about their firm?
I post my jobs on Indeed and Glassdoor. I use them for job postings, and I get quality candidates. To be honest, I don't read the reviews.
The reviews. Yeah.
I don't.
Interesting.
I would much rather talk to someone who worked for the firm.
Okay.
Than listen to a posting on a job board.
Sure.
I want to reach out and talk to someone who's worked there, who's putting their reputation on the line to talk to me.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, David. It's been a real pleasure having you. Next week, we're going to try and get somebody with enough hair to cover a tennis ball. Thank you for joining us.
That was really excellent.
Thanks, gentlemen. Thanks for having me, and I appreciate the time. Take care of yourselves.
Thanks a lot.